the record button. Okay, so good afternoon. We are on the fifth session of the ninth session of the 4-H orientation. And today the topics are going to be how to write learning objectives and also writing a lesson plan for programs that you're doing, as well as, and then I'm going to talk about what is quality curriculum. How do we tell if a curriculum is quality 4-H curriculum? So let me go ahead and get the PowerPoint. Okay. Oops. All right. So creating a positive learning environment. And really to create that positive learning environment, you really need to start by being prepared. And part of that being prepared is knowing how to write up a lesson plan. I mean, we don't walk in and just start teaching. We really need to have a plan in place. And so I want to work through kind of how to do that a little bit. So to create a lesson plan, first of all, you're going to think about writing out a specific topic. So if you're going to host a day camp in swine production, okay, is anybody else having problems hearing me? Okay. So Billy Sue, you might want to just double check your speakers on your computer. And if you can't, then you might have to log out and log in. So log back in. So, okay. So, so you want to think about, okay, got it. Great. Thank you. So thinking about that topic. So it might be a swine day camp where they're going to come and learn about how to care for swine. And so, and then the more specific, and what you would do is here, you wouldn't necessarily have a lesson plan for the whole day, but if you're the one teaching it, then you might have a lesson plan for each topic. The other piece, you might host a workshop on selecting your animal for the county fair. That one would be more specific. So it's that specific topic that you want to do. And then you listen to the learning objective, so then you're going to list the learning objectives. And so I want the participants to, and that's what we're going to spend a bulk of this portion of the session, is how to write those learning objectives. I know if any of you went to school for education, you're probably very familiar with learning objectives, but I think it's really, if you haven't, it's something that takes a little bit, you just have to sit down. And I think it's really important for a couple of reasons. One, it keeps your teaching focused. You want to make sure that they reach those. The other piece is we're evaluating programs. That's how you evaluate, is what are they going to learn? So you want to start, you base your evaluation questions on those learning objectives. But then as you are kind of going through the lesson plan, what do they need to know? So if it's a more advanced topic, then you want to make sure you've identified the basic information that they need to have before you go. In college, there's a lot of classes. As you get into the 300 and 400 level classes, you had to have taken a 100 or 200 level class before you can take that 400 level class. And so it's kind of the same way. You don't want, if you're going to be talking about, say, feed rations and how to create feed rations, then you need to have, everybody that attends that one probably needs to have some basic understanding of feed types. And so it's things like that that you need to think about. Decide how you want to deliver the information. One thing to know about young people is, especially, the age group that we're working with, they really stop listening to lecture after about 10 minutes. So if the main delivery mode for the presentation is lecture, you want to make sure it's broken out by activities. What I learned in my teacher prep classes is that students that you should switch up your teaching style every 7 minutes. So You might lecture for 7 minutes, do an activity for 7 minutes, maybe have a group discussion for 7 minutes, but you should be switching that up about every 7 to 10 minutes. Determine what materials, what PowerPoints or what handouts you're going to need, and we need to make sure that they're age appropriate for that group. You know, you don't want to use things that are designed for adults with even 9 to 11-year-olds. Make sure that they are appropriate. And then consider the assessment or the evaluation. You know, what do you want to do? Do you want to do an evaluation, and what kind of questions should you ask? We should always be doing some kind of evaluation, whether it is, you know, what did you want to learn before you came, and what did you get? What do you remember? Those types of questions. It really, you know, that's the only way that we can make our program better. There are some great examples of some lesson plans. One I'm going to share with you. I believe I have it pulled up. Yes. So this is one, I think this one, no, this is Purdue. So Purdue has these great resources, and this one is a volunteer in, and it's a 4-H toolkit for success. And so they have different lesson plans. This one's on life skill development. And these are really designed for volunteers. So you can see they have the learning objectives. They have the supplies and the resources that are needed for that. So, you know, things like you need the lesson plan, you need to have the notes page. You know, with PowerPoint, I almost always have them printed off with the notes page. So that way I know, you know, and I think about what I'm going to say ahead of time. I may not go, you know, I may not read the notes, but by me writing them out or typing them out ahead of time, I actually think about what I'm going to say, and then I remember it. You want to make sure that you have the LCD projector. I mean, these are very basic things, but I find if I don't write some of this stuff down, I forget that I need it, you know, that you need the life skill development, those types of things. And then the references, you won't have to really worry about the references unless you want to remember where you got the information. For me, I actually usually on almost all of my lessons, anything that I teach, I have a notebook, and that's what, like this is 4-H orientation session number 9. This is my notebook, and it has anything like, so any of the handouts that I share with you, any of the materials that I find to draw information, I actually, because I hard copy it, or I print it off and put it in my notebook. That way next time I do this, I can just grab and go and move on. So, but you know, here's things, you know, but I might want to write those. Sometimes I'm like, okay, now where did I get that from? So I might want to write that down. This is the other piece. Thinking about timing. You don't have to do this, but it's good to kind of think through. So instruction for the life skill development is going to take about 15 to 20 minutes, and then there are optional activities. So if you know you have 30 minutes for a presentation, then you're not going to be able to pick the Budget Busters activity because it takes 30 to 40 minutes, but you need to prep ahead of time. You need to give the background information. You can't just jump right into the activity. You need to actually do some instruction as well. So, you know, if you have 30 minutes and you know that the instruction is going to take 15 to 20 minutes, and you're probably going to pick the knowledge is power or the problem solving squares activity. So thinking about that ahead of time. This one has instructor notes. That could be, the other thing I've been known to do is, so like when we did the common measures training for the grant, we actually had a trainer's agenda, which was a lot more detailed than the agenda that we gave to you. And so it had things like these instructor notes and had a few of those other things. You don't necessarily have to have those in a lesson plan that you're writing for yourself, but sometimes it's a good thing to keep those kinds of notes. I know usually if I'm doing a presentation and I have to remember to hit the record button for Zoom, I will write on my instructor notes, hit record button. And so it's as simple as that. And then they have these method and content. So you don't necessarily have to do this like, you know, this is actually like, so this might be the first PowerPoint slide, this introduction, and then what they're going to focus on. And what I usually do is I don't have it typed out like this. What I do is on the, you know, like I said, on the PowerPoint, I would have that stuff typed out on the notes section of the PowerPoint. If you're unfamiliar with how to do that, then, you know, get a hold of me and I can walk you through how to do the notes portion. But you can see, you know, I think it's just this has got some good stuff. Like I said, you don't have to have all of that. And then here they have the life development quiz, so they actually have kind of their evaluation in there. And then they have an answer key, because you always need an answer key. So that's just one example of a type of lesson plan. Again, you don't need it to be quite that detailed as far as what's actually going to be taught or what the actual lecture or that portion is going to be. But you would want it, this front part is what I really like. So there's one example. And then when you look at, to me, probably our most important part is this learning objective. And the reason I say that is you're going to base what activities you do on those learning objectives. You're going to base your evaluation or your assessment of that event or workshop on that. You're going to figure out what materials you need based on those learning objectives. Oh, wrong way. So when we're writing a learning objective, you may hear other terms for learning objectives. You may hear the term behavioral objectives. You may hear outcomes, enabling objectives, terminal objectives, educational objectives, aims, competencies, instructional objectives. For our purpose, to me, it's a learning objective. So these are statements which describe what the learner is expected to achieve as a result of that presentation or that instruction. So because they direct the attention to the student or the participant and the types of behaviors that we want them to exhibit after they're done, then sometimes those statements are called behavioral objectives. So really, they've been around for a long time. They actually started, learning objectives they've been around for a long time, but they haven't been around for as long as I thought. They actually were first conceptualized and they kind of started using them during World War II. And the reason that they did this is they were trying to make education more efficient. And so it wasn't until the late 1950s and the 1960s that this approach, actually writing learning objectives, was applied to the public schools. And so, you know, I think that has helped our educational system. But there's also, it was Robert Mager who was credited for this book, or for this kind of concept. And so when you look at it, you know, and there's a difference between goals and objectives. And so we have goals. Really, those are statements that are written in broad terms, what the learner's going to gain. So an example of that would be the participants will gain an appreciation for the role of the family medicine physician in the healthcare system. So that's kind of the overarching goal. When you look at specific objectives, that's a statement that's specific and it's measurable. And that's the key with learning objectives, is you need to make sure that they are measurable. And so it describes what the learner will know or be able to do as a result of engaging in that activity. So you can see students will list 3 characteristics that make the family medicine physician distinctive from other specialists in the healthcare system. everybody see where that's a measurable? They're going to be able to write those 3 things. The other piece of it is they use those terms interchangeably a lot. And so it's trying to see that difference. You know, goals are broad, objectives are measurable. And with learning objectives, there's 3 parts to it. One, they need to have a measurable verb. So they're going to be able to list 3 things. So list is your verb, and it's measurable. You want to have the important condition under which the performance is to occur. You know, they're going to list three characteristics, and then you want the criteria of acceptable performance. So if they can't list those 3 criteria, maybe you gave them 5 or 8, but they need to know how to do 3. And so you're going to see, and the one that you aren't going to see as often is the condition where they, you know, it may not be obvious, where the condition or the criteria. And so sometimes if you need to clarify even more, that would be how you would clarify that. So the purpose of the objectives is to really know where you intend to go with your presentation or with your learning session. You're going to decrease the chances that you and the learners never get there. You know, you want to make sure that you end up at the end doing everything that you wanted to do. It helps you to stay on track. It helps you in planning. You know, to be perfectly honest with you, right, because I haven't taught this session for a while. The others I teach pretty regularly, but this one I hadn't done for a while. And so I actually, for the last hour, I sat down and really thought about what I was going to do and how I was going to approach this. And so, you know, that's one of those things that you need to make sure, you know, to think about. Probably it's better if I'm going to be teaching something for the very first time, I don't do it an hour beforehand. I usually do it, a while ahead of time, you know, a couple days or so ahead of time. It gives you as the teacher or the instructor or your volunteers. I mean, this is the other piece. This is really important to share with our volunteers too, because they need to know how to approach lessons. And so it gives you, that opportunity to kind of look at that piece. I think it's also important that we share this information with the learners. So here's the things. A lot of times you'll see in presentations that I do, I will tell you, as a result of this program, these are the things you're going to learn, and it's those learning objectives. And so it helps the learner to understand where you're going and gives them a focus of where they should go. And it allows for that analysis of terms, you know, for your teaching and the learning. You're able to look at that. There is what they call the magic triangle. So this represents the relationship between learning objectives, the learning activities, and the evaluation. So if these 3 components are congruent and they're you're using them in conjunction with each other, then your teaching and your learning is enhanced. So that's why it's called the magic triangle. So if they're not congruent, you know, if you're not doing it at the same time, you know, if you're not creating all of these at the same time and they're not even, then, you know, then your program, your students are going to be unhappy. You're going to be unhappy as a teacher. You know, if you have these great objectives and you do an evaluation based on those objectives, but you've never taught those things, then you're going to have a lot of unhappy people. You know, I think back to school and, you know, if there were things on exams that were never taught in class and never even talked about, then you're going to be, then it was unhappy and people complain. And it's kind of the same thing. And so you want to make sure that you look at that. So, and the learning activities are those things that the student or the participant does to learn, and hopefully, you know, those are somewhat planned by the teacher and that you, or the instructor, and you have planned that. So listening to a lecture would be a learning activity, as would engaging in a small group discussion or making rounds with somebody, you know, if you're doing farm tours, those types of things, those would be. And then the evaluation, you know, in traditional education, evaluation is a test, and we know that that's not the case in our world, but there is truly, you know, an evaluation. And then, you know, and that needs to be reflective of the educational objectives. So here's some examples of some educational or some learning objectives. So identify life skills developed by 4-H members. So what could we do with that? Because in every lesson we have, are we going to have identified life skills developed by 4-H members? So if somebody wants to try, or if somebody wants to type in maybe a better, I mean, that's an okay one, but what's a better learning objective? This is where I'm kind of bringing you into trying to get you to think about the other pieces. I'm hoping somebody's typing. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything that's being typed, so I'm going to go ahead and, so something you could do there is you could probably say, you know, in whatever the lesson is, identify, if it's a lesson on life skills, I mean, that could very easily be one as well. That could be, if it's a lesson on life skills, then they could, oh, you know what? I just realized, no wonder. Guys, you got to remind me, share my screen. This would be helpful, wouldn't it? I'm sorry. It's been, yeah. So here we go. So you can, this is, now that I have it on there, you guys can kind of see. Welcome, Sharon. So, okay, sorry. Got to remind me to share my screen. So you can, you know, with the learning object, so we're talking about this identifying life skills developed by 4-H members. So this could be one that we are, oops. So it could be maybe if it's a lesson on life skills, then it's, you know, it could be identify 3 life skills that 4-H members will learn in sewing. And that could be your objective. Discuss, okay, another example, discuss methods to help youth identify or to develop life skills. That could be one. Explore examples of activities to assist youth in life skill development. You know, and that could be, you know, some of those things, they're not quite as measurable, but differentiate between service learning and community service. So that could have been one that with the lesson that I did a few weeks ago on service learning and service to community, that could have been one of my learning objectives. And then follow the steps to implement a positive service learning project. So again, you know, and maybe they have to identify the steps in that. So just thinking about those. And then, you know, all 4-H work will have some of these learning objectives. So keep and understand records, make informed judgments and explain reasoning behind those judgments. Practice leadership. You can read all of those, but you can see, you know, some of ours, they probably shouldn't have all of them, but they could have, you know, a few of them. So verbs that we should be using. If you're looking at, are they getting knowledge from the lessons? You know, do you want them to gain knowledge? Then you're going to have them define or memorize or list, recall. It's all of those, you know, repeat, relate, name, those types of things. If you want to know if they comprehend what you're teaching, then maybe they restate, or maybe you have a discussion. It doesn't always have to be a paper and pencil evaluation. Maybe what you do is at the end of that session, you could do you could have them break up into small groups and pose a question to them and have them discuss that question. And then for you as the person that's teaching, you're walking around listening to those discussions, not necessarily participating, but just listening and maybe taking notes. It's called observational research. And so that could be one way, or observational evaluation. And so it could be one way of doing that. So they're having a discussion and you find out, or you have a whole group discussion about, you know, that, and that they are discussing it correctly. Maybe they locate, maybe they report, they explain, they recognize or review. So those are some ideas. So effective learning objectives really are consistent with the goals of the curriculum. They're clearly stated, they're clearly measurable, they're realistic and doable. That's the other piece. You know, you want to make sure that they're realistic and they're doable. They're appropriate for the level of the learner, and that they're worthy, that it's important stuff. Because we all know that when we ask a young person to do something, it needs to have purpose to them. They need to feel like it's important. So what I want everybody to do right now is to think about, I want you to try writing a learning objective for a day camp, a 4-H day camp that you're going to be teaching in around sewing. And I want you to go into the question and answer box and type those in. I'm hoping I get to see a few examples. You can either do in the chat box or in the question and answer box. Great. I like that. Youth will learn how to properly sew a zigzag stitch while working on a sewing project. Yes, that's a good one because they can actually demonstrate. Or maybe youth will demonstrate how to properly sew a zigzag stitch while working on a sewing project. I like that. It's again, you know, kind of going back to some of those, these verbs. Yeah. Okay, learning to pay close attention to detail while following the directions for that pattern. Yeah. Well, youth will show 5 hand stitches. Yeah, those are all good. And so as you're writing these, think about now, how can I have them show me how to measure, or how is that measurable to explain the process of a sewing project? Yeah, I think all of those are great ones. You guys have got this. That's the thing, is as you're writing them, think, okay, so how are they going to prove that they've met that learning objective? Some of them can be difficult. I've had issues. Sometimes, I mean, I've struggled with how to write a learning objective. And so I think it's good, though. You guys have met my learning objective right now, and you've shown me that you know how to write a learning objective. You've actually done a learning objective and understand it. So, okay, any questions about that? Okay. And I have a, well, I'll share the PowerPoint. I haven't found any like super good resources. I have another PowerPoint that I pull some of this off of, but I'm not really, I mean, I like it for basic information, and that's what I did, is I pulled off some real basic information from it, but it's not my preferred, like, it's got a lot of academia stuff in it, and I was just like, that doesn't really make sense. So I'm still in the lookout for how to write a really, a good learning objective kind of handout, but I'm not quite there yet. Hopefully someday I'll find it. But okay, if there's no questions about that section, then I'm going to share my screen now so you guys can actually see the PowerPoint, and I am going to, oops, I got to do one thing. Okay, and then, so now we're going to talk about research-based materials. So it's a little bit of, I think, Marissa, you were at the Institute, and Deshay, you were at the Institute. So the two of you probably have heard a little bit of this. It'll be a little bit different, but, and please chime in, because we can't do a lot of the hands-on activities that we were able to do. But I want to share with you kind of the idea of what is research-based curriculum, and what is, why it's important to have research or evidence-based materials to create for quality curriculum. And it's not anything that's unique to Nevada. I'm finding out that this is happening everywhere, especially with the internet available. We're finding that volunteers are just using whatever to teach the young people. And so I think it's really important that we talk about the importance of research-based or evidence-based curriculum within the 4-H program. Part of the reason I say that is because we really tote ourselves in 4-H, and we pride ourselves in the fact that we use research-based materials. We are a research-based organization. We don't just make crap up, and so we want to make sure that we, that our volunteers understand that we're taking the research that's happening at the university, and it may not be happening at UNR, but it's research is happening at a university, and taking that out to the people. And so that's one of the things, why we say that you really need to use 4-H curriculum when teaching. We can't always use it, but we can use it as a base, and that's probably the key to anything. And I'm going to share with you some resources that are really, really good resources, and they're not necessarily 4-H resources, but they have the same, they're still evidence-based, they're still research-based materials. And so it's important to remember that. So the importance of research-based, just to kind of, I'm not going to talk a lot about this one, but just to kind of share with you, the extension of knowledge is that critical component within cooperative extension. And we want to develop our best practices around effective training methodologies. And so part of that is using experiential learning, using those methods, and that's what helps also to make it a little bit better. And so we're looking at integrity as well. So the validity of the materials, is that content if we were to hold it up to a set of standards today, would it meet those standards? And that's, a variety of standards. And so looking at that, is it significant? Is it of interest? Is it going to hold that learner's, is it current and timely? That was one of the things that they've found over the years with the like when they try to do technology curriculum, especially if it's a print-based curriculum, computers or any of that. By the time it actually gets published, it's already out of date. And so what good does that do us? So, looking at, and I'm going to talk about some of these things, it doesn't always have to be print materials. It could be online materials as well. So 4-H curriculum, it's more than a single activity. It should be a series of activities that have a scope and sequence and a series of learning. So each lesson should build upon each other. So curriculum might be, 5 or 6 or 10 lessons. Just, as an example, I just got the, for you guys, the Build Your Future curriculum. And in it is, this is the curriculum itself, and then a leader or a staff person would pick it up. Now, you might pick one lesson, but then, you're also going to pick it up and you're going to go through the activities. And so, like this is activity 2. So you're going to teach activity 2 from it. Or, I actually have some printed materials. I've been looking for some things for the lesson study sessions, and I've been pulling off curriculum that is online as well. So it's kind of got that scope and sequence. Should be designed to be interactive between the learner and the environment, and each new experience draws upon the previous one. And so, you're not going to start a session off on sewing by having them just go to the sewing machine and start sewing. You're going to have to teach them the parts of the sewing machine. You have to teach them how to thread the sewing machine. You need to teach them, about the different types of fabrics that you might use and what settings you need. It's all of those types of things that we need to remember. But they build upon each other. And then learners should be provided adequate time and opportunity to not only do the activity, but then reflect on those activities and on those experiences. Remember the do, reflect, apply. So as we're looking at curriculum, there are some guiding principles for 4-H curriculum. Now these have been designed by National 4-H headquarters. I believe their headquarters or council, I don't, but they're at the national level. And these are really things that as you pick up a piece of curriculum, whether it's 4-H curriculum, whether it's another program, whether it's, we use a lot of, what was the one? Disney has some really good stuff. Lego robot, or the Lego, actually, if you go to the Lego website, there's some really good curriculum. The CDC has some really good curriculum. And so, but as you're reviewing those, these are things that you need to look at and determine. The other piece is I have found some curriculum on state websites that is horrendous and do not fit this criteria at all. Now, they might be super old. And I'll tell you, when we went to Colorado for the Western Institute, I actually went into the state 4-H office. This was before they moved everything over here, and I went through our curriculum files and I pulled some doozies. I pulled some old materials that did not fit this criteria, but it's good because how many county offices still have those materials in their offices? So I'm going to talk about each one of these, so I'm not going to go into detail here. So first thing is the mission mandates. Is the content framework around science? So it could be engineering, technology, applied mathematics, it could be animal science, some kind of science-based, or is it around healthy living, or now it's civic engagement, it's not necessarily, or it's not citizenship, they just, with the name change, it's civic engagement. And if you look at 4-H curriculum, it used to be broke down. Now, granted, it's not as much anymore, but it's still a little bit. It's broke down into different areas. So you have agriculture, and so that would include a lot. That would be, if you look at mission mandates, that's really around science. And, and then you have family and consumer sciences. Typically, those are around the science field. Might be, typically it's around science. There might be some citizenship things in there as well. The health is really under the healthy living, communication and expressive arts. That one they typically will move into, hopefully they have some science base in there, especially with the expressive arts. When you talk about knitting and crocheting and those types of things, those really, if you talk about the wool and the yarn and what's the process for making the yarn, those types of things. So we want, we want it to try to fit around those mission mandates. Then we want to look at essential elements, inclusivity, and life skills. So when you look at essential elements, the context is all of it is framed around positive youth development. So with that includes essential elements of belonging, independence, generosity, and mastery. If you look at inclusivity, that means the curriculum is relevant and fair to multiple groups. It builds on the strengths and the relationships and fosters that respect for the various differences. So, one way that you can tell with inclusivity is look at the pictures. Are they all the same types of kids, or do they have diverse pictures in there? A lot of curriculums sometimes have gone to having cartoon characters in there because they don't necessarily want to have issues with, difference or with that inclusivity. And then you've got the life skills. So are those skills, is it teaching life skills? Is it, helping those young people to get ready for life? The ones that are really kind of key in here are decision-making, responsibility, communication, and leadership. You want to me, if it has those 4 components or even one of those 4 components, those are really critical for 4-H. So you could ask some questions like, is this project or this curriculum or this activity free of bias, both ethnic, cultural, gender, those types of things? Are the 4-H youth development practices incorporated? Does it provide for a safe environment? Is there relationship building? Is there youth engagement, community involvement, skill building? That kind of all falls into that essential elements piece. And the other key question, especially when it comes to this, do these materials adhere to our University of Nevada Cooperative Extension 4-H Youth Development policies, mission, and core values? I think that is another key question to ask. Developmentally appropriate. Do the activities meet the following developmental levels? Is it physically? Is it developmentally appropriate on a physical level? Is it developmentally appropriate on an emotional level, on a social level, and on a mental level? And so those are the pieces, human and positive youth development theories that really shapes the intentionality or the intentional learning outcomes, learning experiences. And we need to make sure that it does. If it's too high of a level, it's not going to hold the participants' attention. If it's too low, it's not going to hold their attention. So we want to make sure that it's correct. The other piece that I'm going to share with you on most of all of these, there is actually a there's a fact sheet from National 4-H headquarters that talks about each one of these, and those will be available for you to download in the Box account. The content of the activity, does it have a scope and sequence? Is it based on experiential learning model? It really should be have opportunities to experience and explore, to share and to process, to generalize and to apply that learning. it should also be based upon educational standards for learning from the start to the finish of that curriculum or that lesson, whatever. And is it research-based or evidence-based? So the difference between research-based and evidence-based is research-based is really going to be based on some research theories. So there's things like, if you've ever taken the Colors Personality Inventory, that is actually a research/evidence-based curriculum. So that is based on the research of somebody years ago by Myers-Briggs and by Young, but it's also, evidence-based of it's been done by, hundreds of thousands of people, and they've tested that it comes out, the same. So the one thing about has objectives and standards. Be sure that, that your lessons, and you don't have to do the educational standards for learning, for everything, but especially if you're getting ready to go into schools and do education in the schools, those you can get in easier and have more success if you tie that lesson back to the Nevada Academic Content Standards. And I went onto their website today looking, and it's all spelled out right there in all the different areas. And so it may take a little bit, but I think that that's really important that that's done. Comprehensive development. So is it peer reviewed and has it been evaluated? And I was just going to look in here. Let's see. This one I know is peer reviewed. The one way you can tell, and I don't know if you guys are going to be able to read this, but one way that you can tell, you can't read it. Look for the list of authors. Look for the project director. In this case, this one was the list of authors. They're all Michigan State. This curriculum, this Build Your Future, happens to be from Michigan State. And it was written by all extension educators. And then the project director is a program leader, emeritus, but it happens to be a program leader. And I don't have any other curriculum sitting right here that I can share with you, but but that's something to look at. Who wrote it? Typically, if it's written, and this is going to sound horrible, but if you see in there that it's written and they have like a PhD behind their names, more than likely it's got a better shot of being a good research-based or evidence-based curriculum. And the reason I say that is because those individuals typically have to go through a promotion and tenure process, and in order to get through that, they have to have evidence-based programs. And so again, that's why I say that. But you want to make sure that it's been peer reviewed. Anything that you get out of the National 4-H Mall has been peer reviewed. It has been vetted. It is good stuff. I do not have any qualms about anything that comes from National 4-H Mall. The stuff that you get from other states, you want to make sure if it's on a state website, then 9 times out of 10, it has been peer reviewed. Because again, most states have similar standards where it has to be peer reviewed. They follow these same standards. And so, and that it's been evaluated, it's been pilot tested. So those are the pieces that you want to look for. If you ever have any questions, then you can, always call that state and ask that question. The ones where I find if it's a county project where, it's been, maybe it's been created by the county, just depends on who that is. It could potentially have been peer reviewed and pilot tested and evaluated, and it may not have been. So, make sure to look for that. So the learning process, that group, and that has both group and individual learning involved. I think that that's really important. Both young people, both youth and adults are learners in the process. Not only, for you teaching the session, but it can also be for the youth. I always learn something every time I teach. And so you want to make sure that that's inflected in that. And make sure that it's clear that what the participants are going to learn and do. And that kind of goes along with that, the individual and the group learning, those types of things. This is one that I don't necessarily feel like needs to be in every one of our 4-H curriculums, because I don't think it can fit in every one of those. I think we need to make sure it has experiential learning model. That is the framework for creating that. But I think it's important too to look at the scientific approach, that inquiry-based process. It's kind of nested within, or it's overlapped with the experiential learning. And, it includes experimentation, investigation, questioning, and argumentation. So if you look at that, so your experimentation is your do, investigation could be your do, your questioning is your reflection, and then the argumentation is could be your apply. So it's in there. So a couple of resources to share. So shop4h.org, that's a 4-H mall. And I don't know, I don't have these. Let me pull up. Okay. So yeah, so here's the shop4h.org. So we try to make inquiry-based learning and all the activities. And I think the inquiry-based is that's a really good platform to use. Not just for science, but for all. Yeah, it is. And I agree with that, Sarah. I think it's a really good one to use with to try to use that. So this is a National 4-H Mall. If you go to the curriculum, again, you've got, here's your science, engineering, or science, technology, engineering, and math, your animals and agriculture. Just going to click on that. There's lots of different pieces in here. You can get, you can see there's tons. This has been, and all of these have gone through a good process. This is where you're going to find the fishing curriculum. I'm still not really sure why it's in agriculture, but it's okay. We'll survive with it there. If you're not familiar with, if you've got horse curriculum, if you're not familiar with this horse science and horses and horsemanship, these are not necessarily curriculum, but to me, they're a resource. They give a really good reference for the youth, unless they've changed them a whole lot since I looked at them last. It's been a few years since I've seen them, but they used to be, no, it won't let me look at them. Okay. So that could be something that you could, those are always good. I'll just kind of go to let's see. Here's vet science. So you can see, because vet science changes, because it is it is that way, they do have these as a digital download. The piece that I wanted to show you is there's two things to look for on Curriculum 2 is you can see, see this little check mark with the clover? That means that it has gone through the vetting process at the national level. And so that's kind of a, good, as we said this morning, good housekeeping, mark of approval or check of approval or whatever it is. That's the same thing. You're going to see that, or you're going to see on this curriculum, because it is a little bit older, it may have this reviewed and recommended by National 4-H Curriculum. So those are things to look for as well, especially if you're looking at the national level. you know, there's just a whole variety. Again, this is one that I have no qualms about people getting on and using these materials. You know, I know that they've been vetted. The other one, I'm going to have to look. So the other one that military, oh no, that's not what I want. I don't know why it just pulled up military partnerships, probably because we were using my computer. This is another one that's really good. This is one that most extension staff forget about, or they don't know that it exists, but we do have our 4-H military partnerships. And if you look under this educator and staff resources page, there is, you know, you've got, I think that's the one. Yeah, this 4-H 10, or this making a difference with military. No, that's the report. This 4-H 101, basics of starting a 4-H club. This is really good, just basic information that you could be using with volunteers, with club members, etc. So I think that you know, to me, these are great pieces. And again, we forget about them. The other one, let's see, curriculum resources. There's also, this is where I was trying to find. I don't always know, because this is one I forget about. If you want to learn about video, if you've got a group that wants to do videography, here is really good. Now, granted, it's got a slant towards military, but you can adapt it. You know, to me, it works really well. This is, yeah, and then you can just download. And the nice thing about this website, everything is free on this website. So here is your, you know, here's the curriculum. Trying to let it catch up. It doesn't want to catch up. So that's one. Oh, here we go. So you can see it's got references, it's got contributing authors, and then here are, you know, your instructor guide, your skills guide. So it's got most everything that you're going to need. Let's see, it's got adult babysitting. It's got some stuff on character education. There's just a ton of resources that we forget are available. And so I think that those are really critical. I think that's a good website. And this is on this is on the web page, or on the PowerPoint that I'll be sharing. It's got that web address. Yeah, Utah 4-H. Right there, that's what I want. So here's another one on the Utah website that these are other references that I like to share, because they have the really good they have the good outlines. And so, you know, I can't download any of them for you, because you have to download them a certain way, but you can see all of the different ones that are available. You know, things from scratch code clubs to spa and relaxation clubs to healthy snacks. There's things specific for clover buds. There's horse first aid. These would be good. These are designed for new 4-H volunteers. There's 6 lessons in every single one of them. They could also be used to supplement what you're currently doing. These are good day camps, those types of things. So I wanted to share that one. And then, you know, there's always things on other states' websites. You know, we've got a few things. We don't have a ton of things on our website, but, you know, hopefully that'll change in the future. But right now, you know, look at other states. Other good states are Ohio. Iowa's got good stuff. Colorado usually has pretty good stuff. I'm trying to think of who has curriculum people on board. So just kind of go out there and look and see what's there. And then here's some additional resources that are these are not extension resources, but these are ones that we have found to have really, really good resources, really good curriculum that fit right in with our guidelines. So the National One Circle Foundation, and I'm trying to remember what that was not one that I had, but my colleague in Alaska is the one that shared that one. I believe that that one was the one on, gosh, it seems like it was like healthy relationships, but she uses it with the military program. The Innovation Center, that one, if you're looking for materials on youth adult partnerships, that is one of the best websites. Lego has got a great educational component, and some of it doesn't cost anything. Some of it does, but some of it doesn't. So let me see if I can find the so let's see. I know that you don't have to necessarily purchase the materials, it seems like. I'm not seeing it right now. But if you kind of play around with that Lego website, they do have some good materials there. The Disney Educational Resources, this is the one that I just learned about, and it is so cool. And I probably won't be able to find it. Okay. I think this is, oh, no. I don't know. Okay. Let me go to this one. Okay, Disney Educational Series. So, oh no, that's the wrong one. I went to the wrong one on those. Okay. Well, anyway, so the Disney one, because my computer just decided to be poopy. So the Disney one, they actually have, thank you, Deshay. Let me check it. We'll see. This is one. Yep, this is the one. So this is what's so cool. So you had Pirates of the Caribbean, and now it probably won't go, but essentially they have little lessons about, so they're learning about, I know in Finding Dory, so they may watch the movie Dory and then you do some lessons on activities. So crafty recycling or speaking whale, or they're learning about caring for ocean animals, responsible fish ownership. They've got Moana in there. Moana is one that, Moana is the one that Candy shared. She has used that not necessarily because she lives in Alaska, and so she has Alaska natives. So she's used the basis for that lesson, but put in information about the Alaska natives. And so what a great experience. You know, you can see they've got Pete's Dragon and Jungle Book and all of these. There's so many, lessons that you could do, and they're really cool. So I suggest going in, and what I'm gonna do, thank you Deshay for sharing that website, because I couldn't find it. I'm gonna put that into the PowerPoint so that way you've got it in there. The CDC has got really good materials on, and other government websites about health and disease. I know Candy was talking about, she did a lesson one time on communicable diseases with her teens, and that can be a very appropriate topic. And she went to the CDC website and found those materials, and they were very research and evidence-based materials. The one that I want to caution people on, Pinterest does have some good things. It also has some very poor things on it. Oh, yep, I bet that is a Lego one. So I'll make sure that is, and I will put it into the PowerPoint as well. But I just want to caution you on Pinterest, because I get, we're not, you know, we don't want to do all arts and crafts, and, you know, but I found some very educational things. Again, when you find something on Pinterest, and sometimes you need an activity that's kind of crafty and, you know, to go along with the bigger picture educational. So that's okay to go to Pinterest, but to go there and that's what your lesson plan is, really, I caution you against that. You know, make sure that you're looking, does it follow our guidelines? You know, especially if it's you know, looking at lesson plans. So, you know, that's one that we have to be a little bit careful about. So a couple of examples of ways, because not only we're looking for research-based or evidence-based, we may not have the specific material, like the specific curriculum, but we can adapt curriculum. So an example, there is a 4-H curriculum called K-Rico, and it was designed for the Hispanic culture. It's, you know, it's getting to be a little bit older now, but it still has some really good stuff. Actually, Brian, the grad student, he was one of the main authors of that curriculum when it came out years ago. But it's still very good. And what you can do is maybe you're not teaching about Hispanic culture. Maybe you're teaching about Japanese culture. And so I know Candy was sharing that the base in Japan really wanted to teach the youth about the culture of Japan. And so, but there is, I mean, obviously we don't have 4-H curriculum on Japanese culture. And so she took the K-Rico project and she just adapted, you know, where it talks about the Hispanic culture, whatever it talks about for the Hispanic culture, she found the equivalent for Japanese culture. Or, you know, I'm thinking about the Vegas group, you know, you guys have such a diversity. Maybe you want to, you know, maybe it's, the Chinese culture, or it's, I know back when I lived in the Midwest, we had a big Hmong community, and maybe you want to teach about the Hmong culture so that everybody has an understanding of it. Or maybe you're working with that group. And so you can use, because that is an evidence-based curriculum and you're using the framework for it, you're just changing the content in it. The other one, a good example for this one, and this is one, Sharon, that might interest you because I know you and I have talked about it a little bit, is the Legos. And we do have several, not Lego robotics, but just straight up Legos. And how do we deal with that? And so one thing that you could do is, there's a curriculum called Palette of Fun, and they have a section in there on sculpturing. You know, sculpture and how do you do that? So maybe they're not using clay or mud to sculpt, but they're actually using Legos to do sculpture. It's the same principles, and you're teaching those principles of art, but using the Legos. And so that's one way that you could adapt if you can't find a curriculum. You know, I get crazy curriculum requests all the time, like yaks. Somebody wanted curriculum on yaks. I finally had to say, you know, we just don't have it, and I didn't have time to adapt it. And it was like 2 people, you know, like one family wanted yaks. And so we finally had to just say, you know, no, I'm sorry, we don't offer that project. You know, here we've had some others, you know, we have a hot air ballooning project in one of the counties. One of the counties has a Pokemon and a Minecraft club. So what curriculum do you think that they could use for those projects? I mean, as you're thinking about those, any ideas? So let's say the Minecraft club. What curriculum do you think they could use and adapt? That one's kind of a hard one. But they could do something around computers, or, you know, figure out, yeah, you know, it would be one we'd have to do investigation in, but there's, you know, there's those types of, you know, those are always good to look at. But the key is we really want our clubs, you know, our volunteers using some kind of research-based or evidence-based materials. And whether we have to adapt the content, but we want that context and we want that basic knowledge. The other piece, and I don't think I have it, yeah, First Lego League, that could be definitely one, you know, and you don't have to have a First Lego League, you know, an FLL team in order to use the curriculum. And so that's a nice thing. You could adapt it for that, because you may not have the, you know, the funds to do all the competition, but, you know, you can still use those materials. So there's a couple of pieces that I will share with you, and I don't think I have them pulled up right now. Let me see if I can find them. The one is, I like this document, if I can get it to, okay. So this is one that University of California has, and it has got, this is a project or activity evaluation. This is one goes into a little bit more detail than the one, you know, than the questions that I had shared, you know, whether that fit into the, what are those? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. These essentially are kind of the same thing, just a little bit more detail. And so this could be something you use as you're evaluating a curriculum. You could use, then I've got, I'm trying to think. There's a couple of documents from National 4-H Council that I think are, you know, are really good. I was trying to see if I could find the one really quick. This is Guiding Principles. This is the one where we talk about the philosophical framework. So this is the philosophical framework, and all of these are going to be in the box for you to pull up. But when I was talking about, you know, like the individual, this is one on mission mandates. So this is how to integrate mission mandates into curriculum. So again, you know, here's the examples. Sorry, I'm going fast scrolling through it, but you can see where you can, you know, where you can use those. So those are all, and like I said, I'm going to put all of those into the box for everybody to use, or everybody to be able to pull up. And so, you know, I'll get all of those. But do you guys have any questions about either, you know, how to write a learning objective, how to identify quality curriculum? I think it's important to share this with volunteers, especially, you know, so they understand, you know, we really need you to try to do this. And I don't necessarily say you have to use 4-H, you know, 4-H mall curriculum, but we need to be trying to use some type of research or evidence-based curriculum. Okay, well, if there isn't any questions, or if you think of one, you know, as after we get off, please don't hesitate to just, you know, shoot me an email or give me a call, shoot me a text, whatever, and hopefully I can, you know, share with you. Or if you see a curriculum that you're like, oh, I'm not really sure, you know, somebody would be happy to look at it, you know, for you. I'm sure there's a few people that, I know we have lots of people in this state that are good at that and write curriculum, so. If there's nothing else, then you guys get done 15 minutes early. It's earlier that it's for taking up time the last few. So thank you guys, and have a great rest of the week. I will be out of the office for a few days this week, but I'll be back. So thank you.